Now, most countries have presidents and parliaments. Now, South Africa has that too, but it also has kings and queens. And this week, the state quietly confirmed how much it pays the very top of our modern leadership structure. So Parliament has just approved the president's new salary, lifting the position to roughly 3.5 million rand a year after a recommended increase of 3.8%. Now, the system works a little unusually. See, the president signs off on salaries for ministers and members of parliament, or MPs, but his own pay must be approved by parliament following some recommendation by an independent commission. And so that latest round of adjustments also pushed MPs to about 1.32 million rand a year, cabinet ministers to just under 2.8 million rand, and deputy ministers to roughly 2.3 million. But here's where South Africa's system becomes a little bit more unusual than most people realize. You see, alongside our modern political leadership with presidents, members of parliament, and cabinet ministers, the country also formally recognizes traditional monarchs. So several kings and queens are officially recognized by South Africa, and their roles are funded through our taxes. So for example, recognized kings earn just over 1.4 million rand a year, putting them in roughly the same tax bracket as a member of parliament, while other senior traditional leaders receive slightly less depending on their rank. In other words, South Africa runs two parallel leadership structures. We have the democratic government and a system of traditional royal authority that still carries formal status. Now, none of this is new, but the numbers tend to draw attention whenever they're updated because, hey, when political salaries increase, whether they're for elected leaders in parliament or recognized traditional leaders, the debate quickly shifts from what these roles pay to what the public expects in return. In 1995, South Africa didn't just host a Rugby World Cup, it hosted a historic moment. Ellis Park, a country finally back on the global stage, and the Springboks lifting a trophy in their debut tournament. And so that kind of home soil theatre doesn't come around often, and according to SA Rugby's own CEO, it's increasingly unlikely we'll ever host again. Riaan Oberhauser admits it this week that South Africa's chances of hosting another Rugby World Cup are slim, not because of stadiums or support, but because of money. You see, the Rugby World Cup is World Rugby's primary revenue stream, funding the entire global ecosystem. And so that means that this tournament goes wherever it generates the biggest return, and where governments can also back it financially. And so, as many of us know, hosting rights are already locked in for Australia in 2027 and the US in 2031, which are both major commercial plays. So here's the uncomfortable truth. South Africa and New Zealand, the two most successful nations in World Cup rugby history, may never host again, at least indefinitely, precisely because we don't make enough money. Look, we have the trophies, but what we don't have is a balance sheet to compete with Europe or other emerging markets. Now, sport isn't the only place where the gap between performance and financial weight shapes what happens next. Discovery has just had its most profitable half year ever, but the most interesting part isn't the size of the profit, it's where it's coming from. So in the 6 months to this past December, headline earnings jumped 27% to 5.7 billion rand, and the dividend was lifted by 28%. Now, the bulk of that profit came from the South African insurance businesses, life, health, the stuff that Discovery has built its name on for decades. As for the bank, though, it finally turned a 75 million rand profit and is adding reportedly about 1,500 clients a day. Now, that's real progress, but it's still very small compared to the insurance engine. And so that's the interesting part. See, Discovery has spent years talking about the bank as the future, this data-driven, AI-powered, behavior-based finance. But right now, that future is still being funded by the old machine. The insurance side is still paying for the dividend hike. It's still bankrolling the bank. Now, that's not a problem. It's a strategy. The real question, though, is when this bank becomes big enough to meaningfully move the group's overall profits. And before we cruise on to our Bagel Bite of the day, here's a couple other headlines worth knowing. For starters, South Africa's financial watchdog has told crypto service providers to monitor and share information on all crypto transfers, domestic and international, as part of tighter anti-money laundering controls. Parliament's Higher Education Committee wants the Department of Higher Education to produce a list of all foreign academics working at universities and colleges without scarce skills qualifications, amid concerns that local candidates are being overlooked for positions that should be filled by South Africans. And ShopRite says that years of investment in AI and data are now paying off, using tools like Microsoft Copilot and Google Gemini to help guide decisions as it expands stores and positions itself against the arrival of Walmart in South Africa. And just a quick side note, if you're enjoying today's show, please can I ask that you like and subscribe. It goes a long way. Furthermore, if you haven't done so already, be sure to join our WhatsApp channel where we will send you a daily message with a link to today's show so you never miss it. The link to that is either in our description below or our bio. Get involved. And on to our bagel bite of the day. Let's see what you got. The question is, which philosopher tutored Alexander the Great? Was it A, Socrates, B, Plato, or C, Aristotle? We'll give you the answer at the end of the show. So if you're planning a hike route now, most people default to the Drakensberg or the Wild Coast. But one of the more interesting routes in the country sits inside the Hoop Nature Reserve along a quieter stretch of the Western Cape. You see, the Whale Trail runs across limestone cliffs and fynbos inside a reserve that forms part of the Cape Floral region, the smallest floral kingdom on Earth. So March can actually be a prime hiking season there. It's warm, it's relatively dry, and it's far less punishing than peak summer. But what you won't get right now are the whales. You see, the southern right whales tend to move into these bays between June and November, with late summer, early spring usually the sweet spot. And so that's when hikers just constantly spot them from the trails. So let's just back up for a second. You're telling me that this is a 5-day coastal hike through the smallest floral kingdom on Earth, where in the right season, southern right whales are breaching off the shoreline while you're frolicking about in your hiking boots. And so that overlap is what makes this extraordinary. It's this strange combination of wilderness and wildlife, and it almost seems improbable that all of this can exist in one place. And so, hey, if you've done the Whale Trail, we'd love to hear about your experience. And as for that bagel bite, the answer is Aristotle. You see, before he conquered Persia, Egypt, and half of Asia, Alexander was sitting through lessons in ethics, politics, and logic. And so the man who would go on to redraw the map of the ancient world was taught by one of history's greatest thinkers. And my friends, that's it for today's show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Again, this is just your reminder to join that WhatsApp channel if you haven't done so already. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day further. Remember, be kind to one another, and we will catch you all tomorrow for the next round of the good stuff. God bless.